I don't know about you guys, but my oldest is only 8, and I've already had several of those moments when it comes to parenting where I'm like, what do I do right now? Well, we are about to start the first week in a series called The Great Standoff, which is about parenting. But first, this morning, we are going to celebrate who God is, and we are going to sing. If you guys would stand with us. So in the Old Testament of the Bible, the book of Psalms, it says, "The joy of the Lord is my strength." And there is strength when we celebrate who God is, when we're not trying to get something from him, but we're literally just singing to him and celebrating who he is. And that is what we are going to do this morning, and we want you guys to join us. Would you sing with us? This song is called "Oh Sing." Magnify the praises of our God. The rocks cry out if we don't shout the praises of our God. There's nothing that can stand against the praises of our God. We will defeat the enemy with the praises of our God. Oh, sing! Oh, sing praise to our God, for his name is worthy, worthy. Oh, sing praise to our God, for our God is worthy, worthy. We can have fun together. We're going to sing one more song called Wonder this morning. our God of wonder this morning. Have you ever seen a wonder? The glimmer of your sight. As the eyes begin to open and the blindness meets the light. Have so say, I see the world in light. I see the world in wonder. I see the world in light, bursting in living color. I see the world's awake, and I'm walking in the light. Have you ever seen the wonder? Every second night, come out of the waters, all left behind. Have so say, I see the world in light. I see the world in wonder. I see the world in light, bursting in living color. I see the world's awake, and I'm walking in the light. I see the world in grace. I see the world in gospel. I see the world's awake, and I'm walking in the light. Walking in the wonder. Wonder in the wild. Wilderness to wonder. So say, I see the world in love. I see the world in freedom. I see the Jesus way. And I wonder in the I see the world's awake. I'm not afraid to follow. I see the world's awake. I'm not ashamed to say so. I see the Jesus way, and I'm walking in the light. I see the world in light. I see the world in wonder. I see the world in light, bursting in living color. I see the world's awake, and I'm walking in the light. I see the world in grace. I see the world in gospel. I see the world's awake, and I'm walking in the light. Walking in the wonder. The wonder in the wild. To the wilderness to wonder. I see the world in love. I see the world in freedom. I see the Jesus way. The wonder in the wild. God, we thank you so much for your presence in this place. We thank you that your joy is our strength this morning. We ask you to meet us as we come before you. In your name we pray, amen. Would you guys take a second and check out your screens this morning for some more about who we are at Paradox?
Hey Paradox, thank you so much for being here today. My name is Matt. You know, if you've been coming for a while and haven't really gotten involved yet, or if this is your first Sunday, go ahead and take out your cell phones and text hello to the number on the screen. This is just a quick way for us to start sending you updates and for you to start to get connected here.
Hey, Matt, what's up, man? Sorry I'm running late. It's a little hard getting through the doorways here. Did you know the doors here are kind of narrow? So, yeah.
Mike.
Hey, Paradox. Yeah.
Mike, what are you wearing?
It's bubble wrap.
Yeah, I can see it's bubble wrap. Why is it bubble wrap?
It's just for safety. It's just a little added safety, you know. The world is a crazy place, and my mom thought, you know, it'd be better if I was... Dude, please do not pop those.
Has it decreased your safety count?
Yes, dude, I'm in danger every time you pop one. Seriously,
How many
back
bubbles
off.
do you have on you right now?
Enough, just enough. Is there anything else we need to tell the people, Matt?
I'm sorry. Yes, guys, I would like to inform you that if you'd like to start becoming a part of Paradox's community, this is one of the fine individuals that you'll be getting to work with, as he is one of our pastors on staff.
Yes, the safest pastor.
Yes, indeed. So, guys, really, us being a community that likes to have fun and just enjoy things, we'd love to start to get to know you and to even maybe suggest a way for you to get involved in the community itself. Go ahead and take a trip downstairs when you're leaving or whenever.
Carefully.
And talk to everybody at the hub. This is our team of people ready to answer any and all questions that you might have. They'll be able to kind of send you on your way safely.
Yeah, dude, that's enough. That's the last one. I'm warning you. Okay, hey, quickly, Paradox, I want to also tell you about our next pit stop that's coming up. What's a pit stop, you ask? That's a chance for us to escape the crazy race of life and get together as a church and just be entertained and informed and enlightened
It was a bird.
as your leadership team presents a night for you. So come and get some dinner. It's this Wednesday, June 6th, and we'll have a great time. In fact, to tell you a little bit more about it, the pit stop that is, and to kind of give you a feel for what's going to go on there, I want to turn it over to that handsome man who's making his way to the stage right now.
Safely?
Oh, why,
Safely,
thank
dude.
you.
Wait.
Hey, Mike. What's up?
Dude, where's your bubble wrap?
I took
You
it
took
off.
it. Stop. Mom's going to kill us. Put it
No, don't worry.
You don't,
I talked to Mom. It's
all
all
right, we'll
good,
have
Mike.
words later.
No
All right,
worries.
Paradox.
I love
We'll
your
see you
brother.
later. Listen to that
All
guy.
right, take care. That's my twin brother, Mike. I did take the bubble wrap off. In fact, you were all given a square of bubble wrap on your way in. Here's what I need you to do with that right now. Nothing. Hold on to it. Don't pop it. Craig is going to have a moment for you to use that later on in the service. So just hold on to that. Right now, though, we are going to have a lot of fun. In fact, I'm going to ask my two pit crews. I've pre-selected two pit crews. Come on up right now. We are going to have ourselves a little race. As the other Mike mentioned on the screen, this Wednesday is our pit stop. That is a chance for us to get together as a church. Anyone who calls Paradox your home, or maybe even you're new here and you're saying, I want to know more about what goes on behind the scenes. Pit stop is a great way to get entertained. We have dinner, we have fun, get informed, we kind of give you updates on what's going on in the church, and get enlightened. Craig has a message for us during that pit stop, not a full-length message, but more of a teaching on leadership and training. And it's a really fun night, and I encourage you to come. And right now, we are going to have our first annual, and maybe last ever, pit stop race. So Matthias and Brandon are ready to go. Are you guys ready to go? All right, they are going to race around, and we've got our pit crews. We've got the Manzella team and the Everett team. Is that right? You guys ready to go? All right, we got red team. Oh, I almost forgot to tell you this. You guys get to be involved in this too. If you pull out the flyer that's in your program that says pit stop on it, you either have a little red car or a little blue car on there. If you've got a red car, you're rooting for Matthias. If you've got a blue car, yeah, you're rooting for Brandon and his team. And the winning team, be it red or blue, will get free dessert when you come to the pit stop. I know, right? So hold on to your flyers when you come to the pit stop and get your free dessert. Are you guys ready to go? Pit crew, are you ready to go? Awesome. On your marks, set, go. All right, and they're off. And they go around. As you can see, they're a little slow. They are blindfolded. Their legs are belted together. They are carrying very heavy backpacks. And not to be outdone, they are handcuffed. This is sounding more like an escape than a race. All right, here they go. They're pulling into the pits. Now, this is the critical time where the true race is going to be won or lost. Little known fact, did you know the very quickest pit stop in recorded auto racing history is 1.94 seconds? Could you imagine? Oh, Matthias is first out of the gate, and there he goes. Brandon, go get him, go get him. Oh, he's got some ground to make up. They're coming down to the end. Who will it be? Oh, he's showboating. Oh, we have a winner. Photo finish. But we have a winner. Sir, you can do your victory lap or whatever you need to do. Thank you, pit crews. You guys may leave the stage. Give them a hand. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, guys. We hope to see you Wednesday. We're going to have a lot of fun, and it's really great. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the microphone over to my good friend, our lead pastor, Greg McGlasson.
Morning. All right, as Mike instructed you, do not pop the bubble wrap. We have security. I will drag you out of this room myself, Joseph Kenyon. Don't do it again. You bums. I shouldn't have said anything, right? Now it's going to happen all morning. Dang it. Can I go back off, come back, and reset? You know what? So here's one of the things I want to start with for a moment. One of the things that we do when we come to church is we associate church with the word worship, even if for some of us we're not quite sure what that means or how to do it. And here's the problem that we have when we think about worship is we tend to narrow it down to very few things. And a lot of times we consider what we just did with the music, well, that's worship. And then there's other stuff that we do. That's part of it. But worship happens in a lot of different ways. Worship does happen when we open our voices, when we open our mouths and sing. Because sometimes you have to say something to start to feel it. Sometimes you even have to say something to start to believe it. So part of worship is when we sing, and that's part of what we hope happens when we sing, that we are throwing words out that will become realities back inside of us as we vocalize them. But worship is also when we open this book. That's why every single week we're in this book. I don't care what I have to say, you shouldn't care what I have to say, or any other pastor on this stage more than what this book has to say. And should we ever contradict it, drag us off. This is opening this book, is worship. We also worship by opening our lives to God. And we also worship by opening our resources to God. One of the things that we do here as a church is that we believe that part of the reality of our life is that everything we have is from God. Scripture says all good things come from Him. And so one of the ways that we worship every Sunday is we offer back a portion of that to Him. Now we do that maybe a little different than you're used to if you've been to church before. But we have these buckets that we have down in the end aisle, and we grab those and ask you to do what you need to do in the bucket and then set them on the floor at the end of the aisle, and people come by. Hold on, before you start passing, here's what I just want you to know. If you're just checking us out, if you're new to Paradox, or especially if you're just new to this whole God thing, trying to understand it, trying to figure it out, then please hear this. This is about the only part of the whole morning that we did not design with you in mind, for the sheer reality that we're not trying to get anything from you. I hope you believe it, because I say it every week, and maybe some of you just get used to it, but I mean it, which is why I say it every week. We want you to take from us, because God is a giver, He is not a taker. The reason that some of us give back isn't because we have to, it's because we get to. And it's because we believe that God has already given us all that we have. If that's you, then would you grab the bucket, pass it down, do what you need to do, and then set it on the floor. Somebody comes by to get those in just a couple of minutes. Now, as that's happening, I want to take us to a quick verse that for many ways is going to be kind of at the heart of this whole series that we're launching today. It is a promise made by God available to all of us who would apply it. But not just a promise, it is at the core of what I hope the next couple of weeks will be for us as a church in this series. So on your screens, here it is, a promise made in Proverbs. Train up a child in the way he should go. And even when he is old, he will not depart from it. If you're a parent, I don't know if you've felt like this, but at times, you can wonder as a parent, like, is anything I'm doing getting through? And when they are older, is anything that I'm doing now going to have translated and made its way through? You can wonder that as a parent. And I can just tell you, so my wife and I, because I hear this all the time, parenting, becoming a parent, is one of the hardest things I've ever done. I don't know if any of you would identify that. Becoming a parent, hardest thing you've ever done. I would be honest and I would tell you this. Becoming a parent, easiest thing I've ever done. Piece of cake. All that took was a couple candles, a little romance, whole lot of fun. We became a parent. It's great. My son is grossed out. No, he's not even listening. Look at that. Pay attention, boy. Parenting those children, whole nother story. My wife, Nicole, and I got married when we were 20 years old. And being basically kids ourselves, we decided let's wait a couple years until we start trying to have kids. But on March 3rd, 2003, so 3303, a cool birthday, our little Tobin showed up. This little guy showed up and totally flipped our world upside down. I know. You know, it's funny. All 6'1" of him now, we could reverse that picture and I'd be the one going, towers over his dad. Talk about insecurity when your boy towers over you. So we had a couple of years, 4 years of trying to figure out what does life look like now, and just completely reordering life and figuring out a new rhythm of relationships and home. And we felt like we got it down enough that 4 years later we decided to up our game. And we created two at once, and then these guys came along, Jocelyn and Corinne. I actually told that joke once in another church, and somebody came up to me afterwards, and they go, what did you do to make two at once? Like, as a joke, dude, and it's nothing. It just happened. And so here's what I just want you to know. They're 11 now, and Tobin is 15. And so by no means do Nicole and I consider ourselves experts in parenting. However, I would say this. I feel like in the 15 years that we have been trying to figure out this thing called parenting, we've made enough mistakes now that we've learned a couple things. Like, for example, the fact that all of parenting happens in stages, and at every single one of those stages, parenting changes and evolves, right? You start off in stage 1, and it's just simply poop, eat, and sleep. That's all they do. There's not much parenting involved except make sure they don't die. I mean, that's stage 1. Then you move on to stage 2, and I call it the giggle box. That's when they start to recognize your face a little bit. They're a little more expressive. Still not much parenting involved, just kind of take care of the basic needs. But then it turns into walking, talking stage. And then parenting starts to actually gain some traction because now they can stare at you and say no. Now you go this way and they say, no, I'm going this way, right? Now like you start to see the development of a little bit of personality, disobedience. Then you move from there to one of my favorite stages, which was the superhero stage. You remember this? Some of you are in this right now, where you are literally a superhero. Superhero mom, superhero dad. You can't do anything wrong. Like there's Superman and you. There's Wonder Woman and you. Like that's you right now at that stage. Then you move from superhero stage to you know everything, right? You're everything, you know everything, to the stage of you don't know anything, right? Hello, teenage years. You don't know anything. And I know everything. I was there, right? I thought my parents knew nothing, or at least I knew a little bit more than they did. And then you hit, I don't know how many of you can remember this, but I remember in my 20s, you hit that phase in your 20s where you blame your parents for everything, right? Mom and dad, I'm screwed up because you're screwed up. Like, they're the fault for everything in your life. And then somewhere between 25 and 30, this is when it happened for me, you actually start to really appreciate your mom and dad. And then there's this last phase, and it still involves parenting on your part, where your kids have kids. And that's when they realize, holy smokes, how did you put up with me? Because they start to understand just how difficult parenting actually was. And through each of these stages, everything develops, and it evolves, and it changes. And unless you have the most compliant child in the world, or you yourself are the most laid-back person and parent in the world, here's the reality. At all of these stages, multiple times over, it can feel like a standoff, right? It can feel like who's going to win, who's going to get their way, whose home is this, and parenting can just feel like a bit of a gridlocked stare down between you and them and who's going to win the day. And so here's what we're going to do. In the next couple of weeks, we are going to turn to God's word for some wisdom on this thing called parenting. Not just how to do it, listen, how it's been done to us. Because part of what I want to draw out of this series is not just the fact that some of us in this room are parents, but that all of us in this room have them and have been shaped by them. And some of that's been good, and some of that hasn't been. And possibly nothing in all of life has impacted the formation of who you've become like the home you grew up in, some of which needs to be celebrated and embraced, and maybe some of which needs to be let go. And so for the next couple of weeks, we're going to turn to God's word on wisdom. How do we parent, and what do we do with some of the ways that we were parented? We're going to turn to one another for some wisdom on that. And what I'm really excited about is on Father's Day, 3 weeks in on this series, we're going to bring a group of our teens up on stage, high schoolers, middle schoolers, and we're going to ask them. Because, as parents, here's what we do sometimes. We do this thing where well, in my day, and we think that because we were once kids, we get what it's like to now be kids. And we superimpose a lot of what we think it's like to be a teenager today or at any age. So what I want to do is kind of pause for a moment and actually ask some of our teens, what is it like to be you? What is it like to navigate this world today with the pressures and the relationships? What is it like to walk through this life and try to pursue Jesus in this culture? And we're going to sit here on week 3 on Father's Day, and we're going to listen to our kids bring us the message. So if you weren't planning to be here on Father's Day, I hope you will now, because I think it might be one of the most impactful weeks of the whole series. So this is what I just want to do for a moment now. I just want to pause and ask that God would be present to us and would speak. especially on a morning like this, when we have any kind of a subject that has the potential to narrow in on a small group of people where some of us will feel left out because we don't fit the perfect mom. I'm not a dad, I'm not a mom, or that was so long ago, that, I'm empty nesters. I just want to pray that God's word would do what it has the power to do. And wherever you are this morning, is that he would speak into your life with what it is you need to hear. So let me pray to him and ask him to do that. Father in heaven, I ask that over the next little bit that we come to you and we open your word, that you would be good to us and faithful to your promise, that these words are alive and living, and that they have the ability to pierce to the deepest parts of who we are. Would you bring life to us through them? And would you speak to us through them? Through the stories that we read, through the verses that we read, would you, I pray, in your wisdom and in your sovereign grace, would you give to each one of us exactly what we need from you today from your word? Maybe for some of us, we don't need to hear anything about being a parent, but we need to hear about you as our great Father. Or maybe for some of us, we just need to wrestle with some of the wounds that we still carry from our parents. God, wherever it is that we're at this morning, would you be good to us, to be present to us? And would you speak to us? Would you give us ears to hear? And then courage to respond. In Jesus' name, amen. So one of the things that I hope we can get out of the way very quickly is the potential resistance that some of you might feel on a morning like this or for a series like this, which is just simply, man, this is one of those Sundays I should have stayed home. Or, you know what, thanks that now I know the next couple weeks are going to be this because I'm going to skip this series because it doesn't apply to me. And there's a variety of reasons where you might think it doesn't apply to you because maybe you don't have kids. Maybe you want to and it hasn't happened yet. Maybe your kids are grown and gone, so you're like, man, that doesn't apply to me anymore. They're out having kids of their own. But here's the reality, as I said a minute ago, nothing in all of life has shaped you to be who you presently are as much as the home you grew up in. And so part of what I think will happen as we move through this series is not just a message to those of us that are parents, but to all of us, because all of us have them. Whether we have great relationships with them or horrible relationships or no relationships, we have them, they've impacted us, and frankly, some of the impact that our parents have had on us still needs to be celebrated and appreciated. And maybe the result of this series is that some of you will walk back to mom and dad and just thank them. But there's also a reality that for some of us, some of what was passed on to us by mom and dad still needs to be wrestled with, brought and laid before a good God who heals all wounds and then let it go. So I think there is the possibility for a series like this to apply to all of us wherever we're at. Even though the focus, we're going to narrow in a bit for a few weeks on moms and dads. As we do that, I want to ask you a quick question, though. This is kind of a little bit of a group participation moment. What do you think is the number one challenge to good parenting? If we're going to talk about parenting, what's the number one challenge to good parenting? What? Okay. One more time, Pastor Greg. Having kids. Ding, 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 ding. Thank you. You hit the nail on the head. Parenting would be really, really easy if it wasn't for having kids, right? We'd all be experts at it. So here's what I want to do. Can we just have an honest moment where we can get real with one another? Because the last thing I want to do is have a series where any of us walks out of here and feels shamed. Feels like, well, I guess I'm messing up, failing, and I can't do it good enough as a parent. Because we all do that to each other already. It's through Facebook, right? Where we take a photo of the best moments. Oh, look at me. We all love each other. And then we put the phones down and we hate each other and we're fighting with each other. Like I said this in the first service. I wonder if we took this entire series and only posted our worst moments in our families online, like how might that just encourage one another? Like, wow, them too? Me too, you know? So here we go. The real question is, what's the biggest barrier to great parenting? Is kids. So honest moment. How many of you would typically describe yourself as a reasonable, sane, rational-minded person, and yet at one point or another, your kids have made you lose your mind? Hands up. All right? Keep your hands up if at some point, as a parent, you've disciplined them and felt like you might have gone a little too far. Now, that doesn't mean that you necessarily threw them against the wall, but maybe you said something you didn't mean to say. Maybe you reacted a way you didn't mean to react. So you parented and you felt like I went a little too far. I'll just be honest and throw both mine up right there. Right? Yeah. Okay. So can you just keep your hands up? Can y'all look around for a minute? This should be really encouraging to us. right? Because this is what you don't see on Facebook. This is what you don't see when you just take a peek into somebody else's life, or the honest moments where we go, screwed that up, messed that up, went too far, lost my mind. So I hope one of the things that will happen, you can go ahead and put your hands down, is that, not you, Rick, you need to keep it up all service, is that I hope you'll find some encouragement to realize we're all trying to figure this thing out if you're a parent. And nobody handed us a manual that says, here's what to do with your kid, their personality, every single day that they're alive. Which means many days what we're figuring out, like I feel like Nicole and I are, by making a whole lot of mistakes. Question number 2, I just want to ask, again, a little bit of participation is this. What do you think is the number one quality of good parenting? Patience. Love. Saying you're sorry. Yeah. What is it? Short memory. That's good. I think that's the number one good quality for marriage. What else? Consistency. Teamwork. It's good. Anything else? Get out of jail free card. Tobin, what do you think, son, is the number one good quality of parenting? Come on, man, the world is yours right now. This is your chance. What? You said it last service and I can't remember it. That's great. Well, there's my failure as a father. Here's what I think the number one quality that is the foundation to good parenting is. It's faith. It's faith. Now, this is a promise that Jesus once made us, and it wasn't directly about parenting, but I think it involves it. Chapter 17 of the book of Matthew, verse 20 says this. He replied, he's talking to his disciples. He says, because you had so little faith, I'm going to tell you this. If you had faith as small as a mustard seed, you could have said to this mountain, move from here to there, and it would have moved. Nothing will be impossible for you. Do you ever feel like there's moments where marriage feels a bit impossible? Whether impossible because of the dynamic between you and your kids, or maybe their dynamic, or the culture's influence, whatever it is. There's moments where as a parent, you just feel like this is impossible. Parenting falls under the umbrella of impossible. Nothing is impossible if you have faith. If you have faith, listen to me, parenting isn't impossible if you have even the littlest amount of faith. But here's the thing, faith in what? You go, well, God, yeah, but how does that become practical in parenting? Is it just faith that God exists? Is it faith that my kids will be safe in a dangerous world? Is it faith that maybe my mistakes won't outweigh my successful moments as a parent? Like faith in what? Because faith is a very real thing. It is an incredibly powerful thing, but very often it can also feel like a bit of an ethereal, abstract thing. Like, well, what does that actually look like, and how do I take this thing called faith and apply it into the way that I parent and relate with my kids and raise them? What does that look like in an abstract, non-abstract, but an actual practical way? So there's a couple stories I find that throughout the Bible, throughout my walk with God, I tend to go back to. Sometimes just for my own personal study, and sometimes for us as a church. So if you've been here any length of time, you could probably begin to even pick some of those out. One of those for me is the story of Moses, who I just feel like that guy's life is jam-packed with so much, from beginning to end, that speaks to us in our lives. But most of what Moses is known for, when you think of the life of Moses, the places we immediately usually go to is the whole toe-to-toe with Pharaoh, let my people go, parting of the Red Seas, leading out the Israelites from Egypt. But long before any of that happened, there were moments that took place in the life of Moses that happened not from what he did, but what was done for him by his parents. Moments when they took faith from being just this abstract thing and made it very practical in what they did, how they related, and how they trusted their son, their baby son, to the hands and to the plans of God. So if you know the story, then you know that Moses' story didn't begin with, let my people go. It started generations earlier when the Hebrew people moved into Egypt and were good neighbors with the Egyptians, when they actually had good relationship. But things have changed over time. The throne is passed from a father to a son, and there's no longer a good relationship. So the verses, we put them on the screen if you don't have a Bible, but in Exodus chapter 1, this is the backstory that we read. Verse 6 says this. Now Joseph and all of his brothers and that generation had died. But the Israelites were exceedingly fruitful, and they multiplied greatly, increasing in number and became so numerous that the land was filled with them. And then a new king to whom Joseph meant nothing came to power in Egypt. Look, he said to his people, the Israelites have become too numerous for us, so we must deal with them shrewdly, or they will become even more numerous, and if war breaks out, they may join one of our enemies, fight against us, and leave the country. So they put slave masters over them to oppress them with forced labor. And they built Pithom and Ramesses as store cities for Pharaoh. But the more that they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and spread. So the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites. And they worked them ruthlessly. They made them work their lives bitterly with harsh labor in brick and mortar and with all other kinds of work in the fields. And in their harsh labor, the Egyptians worked them ruthlessly. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, whose names were Shiphrah and Puah, when you are helping the Hebrew women during childbirth on the delivery stool, if you see that the baby is a boy, kill him. But if it is a girl, let her live. And the midwives, however, feared God and did not do what the king of Egypt had told them to do. They let instead the little boys live. And then the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and asked them, why have you done this? Why have you let the boys live? I love their answer. The midwives said to Pharaoh, the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. They are vigorous and give birth before we even arrive. And so God was kind to the midwives, and the people increased and became even more numerous. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families of their own. Then Pharaoh gave this order to all of his people. Every Hebrew boy that is born you must throw into the Nile, but let every girl live. Do you ever realize that, if you know this part of the story, that it wasn't just the forces of Pharaoh, the army and the guards. Because the midwives didn't do their job, Pharaoh actually went to all of the people. People who were neighbors to the Hebrews, and said, every one of you who are Egyptians, it is your job to kill the Hebrew boys by tossing them in the water and drowning them. So as parents, one of the things that we wrestle with is just the reality of the difficult culture that we're bringing our kids into, the world that we're bringing them into, the society we're bringing them up in. I know even for some people, they wrestle with whether or not to have kids because of just the world that you're bringing them into. Should we even have kids? Should we not have kids? However, given the fact that there has been no order from our president to murder our sons, there's a good chance that I think for many of us, we have understood, undersold the reality of the fierce world in which they have been born into and the danger that surrounds them. We would do good as parents to, I think, take to heart the warning found in a book called Ephesians that says that we don't battle against one another. Our greatest fight in this world is not against people. It is, in fact, against the reality that there are forces, spiritual in nature, that are set against us. And that truth applies to your kids. The very moment a first breath is drawn in their lungs, they have an enemy who hates them. Hates them. They are a target. They are a score. There is an enemy who, whether through physical, social, or emotional, will do everything he can to destroy them to one ultimate end, and it is to rob them from ever knowing the God who made them and has plans for them. Our kids are born into a world that in many ways is no less dangerous than Moses was born into, because there is an enemy that seeks to devour them just as much. And even though it is not an order handed down by our government, we cannot, as parents, lull ourselves into a disbelief that our kids are in any less danger than they were when they were born into Moses' day and age. And yet, in that, God proves himself sovereign and gracious and present no matter what forces are against us. So here's the story where we start to get familiar with Moses. Exodus chapter 2 goes this way. Now a man of the tribe of Levi married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. And when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him, coated it with tar and pitch, and then placed the child in it and put him among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. And then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank. She saw the basket among the reeds and said to her female slave to go get it. She opened it and saw the baby, and he was crying, and so she felt sorry for him. This is one of the Hebrew babies, she said. Then his sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you? Yes, go, she answered. So the girl went and got the baby's mother, so Moses' mom. So she goes back home, gets her own mom. She's Moses' sister. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you. So the woman took the baby and nursed him. So I remember the first time I looked into Tobin's eyes when he was all 7 pounds and 11 ounces of him laying in that little basket thing that they put you in when you're first born. And I remember I stood there forever and just stared at him. Because if you've had that moment, then you know this. Like, I didn't realize until that moment how deep you could love another human being and how quickly without them having done a single thing to earn it. And I remember just staring at him forever, it felt like, just looking at him thinking, holy smokes, this is mine. I can't imagine 3 months later putting him in this and staring down at the same face that now at 3 months old is starting to recognize my face. Smiles, maybe giggles a little bit. He's starting to know me, and staring at him one last time before I take this, put it in a river, and abandon him, and let him go. How long do you think she held that basket? Let's think about that. How long would you? The government's coming after your son. You can't hide him and keep him quiet anymore, and this is the decision that you've come to. Like if this is me today, one of my kids are in here, and on the other side of this is possible death, it's going to take every one of you in this room to get this out of my hands. How long do you think she sat there and held it before she finally let it go? And here's what makes the whole scenario even more dangerous, is that we have this mental picture a lot of times that when we think about this moment in Moses' life, it kind of plays out in our minds like this. She puts him in the river, and it just floats down, bumps into the daughter's leg, and she looks down and goes, oh. The reality of the story actually makes it far more dangerous because he wasn't floating down the river. What did the text just say? Where was he? He's in the reeds. So she goes to the bank and sets him in the reeds, which means he's stationary. Now here's why that's more dangerous. What else lives in this river? Crocodiles. Is a stationary target or a moving target easier to get? Says the hunter. Stationary. He's more susceptible to any alligator that comes along. But not just an alligator. What was the instruction given to every single Egyptian? You find a Hebrew, you drown him. This little boy is stationary at the bank. Anyone who hears him cry is under order from Pharaoh. You kill him or I kill you. That's your instruction. And here's the reality too. Jewish tradition believes that Moses' parents didn't just casually drop him in any place. This looks like a good spot. That there was an understanding that there was a certain area that Pharaoh's daughter came to bathe. So this was a strategic pick on their part. But it also makes it a 50-50 chance could go either way. There's no guarantee that she's going to pluck him out of the water. She could just have likely have looked in, seen it was a Hebrew, and then either herself or one of her attendants, as she ordered them to do so, drowned him as her father had done with so many other babies in that very river already. Maybe even in that very location. There's nothing inside me that would understand a parent's ability to have this whole moment of take your precious little boy, put him in a basket, set him in the reeds, and walk away. Nothing in me could understand that moment with all the odds stacked against them other than they somehow generated this unbelievable courageous faith to trust their little boy to the hands and the plans of God. To trust that God loved him more than they did. To trust that before they were parents to him, God was a father to him. And to even trust that no matter what happened, the moment they took their hands off of that basket, God is sovereign, God is good, and God has a plan in all things. No matter what happens the moment they walk away from that basket. As a matter of fact, there's a writer who wrote a book called Hebrews in the Bible, and he includes this snapshot in chapter 11 of what was going on in the heads and the hearts of mom and dad when they had this moment. Just in case you think I'm over-exaggerating the details of the story, here's what it says, Hebrews 11. 23 says this, say the word, by faith, there it is, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months. Not by no other option, not by guilt, not by fear they hid him. By faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born because they saw that he was no ordinary child and they were, say it, they were not afraid of the edict of the king. How are you not afraid when the president says, I'm after your son, unless you believe there is an authority greater than him? Unless you have faith to believe my little boy belongs to God even before me, is loved by God more than me. God has plans for him that I don't know about and that I could never have because he is their first father. Here's what I wonder for you and I. I wonder as parents what this looks like as we parent. Like, what does this moment look like for you with your own kids? Because it will look different with different kids. It will look different at different stages. A moment to truly trust your kids to the Lord and to walk away. That's why, listen, I think that the number one quality to good parenting, it is the foundation, is faith. Faith to trust your kids into the hands of God. And at times, as a parent, even know when to step back and take your hands off and listen to me, even leave them in the danger of the reeds and trust God's plans over yours. The first place this always starts is an emotional place. And then it moves to very practical decisions you have to make where what you believe has to get kicked out onto the field so that it can actually play. But it always starts first as just an emotional reality that you have to come to at the deepest parts of who you are, that God loves your kids more than you do. God has plans you don't have. He is their father more than you are their mother, more than you are their father. He is their first father. And that starts here, and then it goes out to practical decisions. Like for Nicole and I, the first time that we got faced with having to make that decision, a very internal, deep decision, happened days after Tobin was born. So doctors come in, they start telling us there's a problem, which is never what as a new parent you want to hear. Right? As a new parent, everything already freaks you out. So there's a problem. We haven't even gone home from the hospital yet. Well, what's the problem? Another day later, they narrow it down. It's his heart. Now we're peaking at being freaked out. And then they come back to us and say he has several holes in his heart. Ventricular septal defect. Between the left and the right chamber, he was born with 6 to 8 holes. Really, really tiny holes. Cardiologist that we had said he'd never seen anything like it in all of his career. He'd seen big holes, he'd seen a couple, but he'd never seen that many that small. So we were told they had no idea what to expect. And this is literally what they said to us before we've even taken him home from the hospital. It could mean nothing, or you may have to come back for open heart surgery. So we just had this very real moment, almost immediately, where we had to come to grips with this. He is God's before he is ours. And God loves him more than we even do. And no matter what happens in the days to come, God is sovereign, God has plans, and nothing can undo the plans of God, even if we can't understand them. And then our daughters were born a few years later. And when our daughters were born, we had some friends 6 months before our girls were born that lost their infant child. And so again, we felt like we were thrust into this moment where you have friends that lose an infant and then you have 2 that are born to you. That will freak you out every night you put them to bed. We had serious moments where we just had to come to God. Like it was real struggle at times to just put them down to bed at night and step away from their crib. There were times where I fell asleep with my face next to their crib because I scooted it right to my bed, and we just had to come to grips with the fact that this is true. God cares about my kids more than I do, loves them more than I do, has plans for them that I don't know and I don't have. And in all of his plans, he is sovereign and good, even if we don't understand. But then it turns into very practical moments, too. Like I remember a few years ago, first time I ever went to Haiti. We had this moment where Tobin wanted to go away on a trip with some kids from school. And it was going to be the first time that, my not 6'1" kid at that point, but like whatever tall, my little Tobin was going to go away up north, hours away, and I was going to be in a third world country. Nicole was going to be at home with our other 2. And I was a little panic-stricken. We're like, I don't know, it seems like a silly thing now, but looking back then, it was a real moment where this belief had to become a practical decision. And I'm like, I don't know if I let him go. Should we let him go? I'm going to be in another country. I can't get home. I can't help if anything goes wrong. And he's like, I want to go. And we wrestled with that. And finally, we did this. All right, we're going to let him go. And guess what? It all worked out fine. But then there's been other decisions along the way, whether it's going to school, the friends he hangs out with. Do you know what would be easy for me as a dad? Even spiritually. I have to do this spiritually because it'd be easy for me as a dad to take this and just shove it in his face, right? You're going to read your Bible. You're going to memorize Genesis. You're going to, as a dad and as a pastor, I could put all kinds of emphasis on you. You need to do more of this and be more of that. And there are times I even have to step back from his spiritual journey and realize I'm going to let God nurture him. That doesn't mean I'm uninvolved. It doesn't mean I don't give input. It doesn't mean I don't give influence. It doesn't mean I don't model to my kids. But I could very easily just shove down their throat, even their spiritual journey. And even with that, there are moments I have to step back and go, you know what? Even if they're not being and doing what I want at this moment, God is their father more than I. And there are moments I got to take my hands off and I've got to step away. So I wonder for you, what does a moment like that look like right now that you might be facing? Because if you're not facing it at this exact moment, you will. And you'll face it, here's the thing, many times over. Verse 10 of the same story we just read says this. When the child grew older, she took him, mom, takes her son, took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. So hold on. Mom, who has now raised her own son, most scholars believe he's somewhere between 4 and 6 years of age. So for the last 6 years, she's raised her own son, Moses, and now has to walk him to Pharaoh's daughter, the daughter of the man who wants him dead, and allow her to become his son. How's that feel? Listen, there's no basket involved this time, but you better believe that there is still, again, another moment where this mom had to conclude, he is God's son before he is mine. And God will be good to him. And I need to leave him yet again in the reeds and back away and trust the goodness of his first father. There's no basket this time, but there's every bit the same scenario happening as when she put him in that Nile River. So what is this for you right now? Like, is it just at an early phase for you where it's still just a very internal decision you have to come to and realize, like, they are his before they're yours. He cares about them more than you. Maybe that's where you're at as a parent, regardless of what age maybe your kids are at. Maybe that's just where you're still at. Like, that just needs to become a very deep-seated belief by faith that they are his more than yours. They are loved more by him than by you. He has plans for them. Or maybe it's a more practical decision you need to make. Like, maybe, I know there's so many different stories in here and different phases of life. Maybe for some of you, it's that your time as a stay-at-home parent is coming to an end. And that's freaking you out because you've been there all this time. And maybe they're about to go to school. And you're like, good grief, they've always been under my care. Or maybe they're about to graduate. Maybe they're graduating high school right now. And you're like, now what? They've always been at home, and now they're going to move. Maybe they're moving out. Maybe they're about to get married. Maybe they got married, but they've grown distant. Maybe it's an illness that they're battling with. Maybe it's a divorce they're going through. Maybe it's just a stupid mistake they've made in the last year. I just wonder if there's a place where what you're trying to do as a parent is you're trying to come in and you're trying to take care of all of it, to fix it, to make it better. This doesn't mean that we are uninvolved parents, but it does mean that faith knows when to do this with our kids. Put the basket in the reeds and step away and trust God is a better parent than you are. See, I wonder where God might even be asking you to do that. Put your kids in the reeds. Not just trust him with them. Actually leave them in the reeds. Which, listen to me, sounds ludicrous to us as parents. Because more than ever in our culture today, we do everything we can to keep our kids out of the reeds. Don't we? Don't hang upside down on the monkey bars. Don't run too fast. Oop, that's going to hurt you. Put a helmet on. Like, we don't do anything that would let our kids possibly get hurt. We're so guarded. We're so overprotective. And oftentimes what that betrays is a belief that's this. I'm a better parent than God is. I can take care of them more than he can. We are a culture and a people who do not want to ever place our kids in the reeds and trust them to the sovereign good parenting of God. As a matter of fact, everything even about that sounds and feels counter to what it would mean to be a good parent. And yet I believe the foundational principle and quality to good parenting is the faith that knows how to place our kids in the hands and the plans of God, and at times step back and let him parent where we might have the tendency to come in and protect, to do it for them, to take care of them, to pull them out of danger, to pull them out of a sad moment, to pull them out of the disappointment of a frustrating relationship, to give them everything they want so that they don't feel like they're the only one that doesn't have what everybody else has, and come in and try to be better to them than maybe God is being in a moment. Matter of fact, think about it this way. The very river that was intended to be the tool used by Pharaoh to murder Moses became the river that was the tool used by God for his salvation. I don't think it's a coincidence that the very place that Pharaoh's going, I will kill that boy, God says, no, in that place, I will save that boy. Is it possible at times that as parents, we rush in to rescue our kids from moments that we're worried they will drown if we don't intervene? And God is going, hands off. They will not drown here. I will save them here, lift them up out of the water here, and I will set them towards the purpose I have made them for. And is it possible that at times when we're attempting to protect them, we're actually intervening with the work of God and what he's trying to do in their lives? Because we think we can parent them better. Because we think we have to take care of every situation for them, and God's going, by faith, by faith, by faith, put them in the reeds and let me take care of them. And this doesn't mean careless parenting either, right? It's not like your kids are 3-year-old and you go, hey, go play in the street, they'll figure it out, take care of them, God. That's careless, irresponsible parenting. Moses' parents weren't irresponsible. You look at just the details of the story, and there was all kinds of intentional process and thought happening. There were conversations they were having at home. There was wisdom they were displaying. And in the sheer fact that they picked the location they did wasn't by happenstance. They picked that location because they knew Pharaoh's daughter went there. There were conversations mom and dad had at home about Moses and what do we do and where should we put him. That's a great idea. Yeah, she comes there. Let's do it. They're thinking this through. There's strategy to this. Even the fact that they had the daughter sit there. So I don't know if you realize this, but Moses had an older brother and an older sister. And they chose not the brother, they chose the sister to go watch, right? There's good thinking there. You choose the brother to go watch, and what's going to happen? Brother's going to come home, and they're going to go, what happened to Moses? Oh, yeah, about that. I went fishing, I don't know. Should I go back and check, right? They're like, maybe dad was like, we'll send Aaron. No, send his sister. And even the fact that mom is at the ready. You think there wasn't conversation between her and her daughter? Okay, if she picks him up, and if they don't do whatever else they could do to him, come get me, suggest me. Because daughter rushes right in. His sister rushes right in. Hey, I know somebody who could take care of him. Like, listen, there are plans. Here's what I want you to hear me say, that even though Moses' mom and dad placed him in the reeds, trusted him to the hands and the plans of God, doesn't mean that they were careless, uninvolved parents. It does mean, though, that if they hadn't chosen by faith to put him in the reeds, he would have never been plucked out by Pharaoh's daughter. He would have never been adopted into the palace. He would have never been raised in the wisdom, the knowledge, and the leadership of the Egyptians that served him later on leading the Hebrews. And it's very likely he would have died as an infant, never having led the Hebrew people out of captivity from Egypt. When they placed him in what to them seemed like the most dangerous spot they could have put him, they were setting him up for God to parent him towards all the plans in the future that he had in store. So there's a couple different ways that I feel like as parents we could relate to this thing called parenting. And I know this is a very general sweep, but let's start at maybe the farthest negative picture that we can come up with. We'll call this the complete absent parent. And maybe this is what some of you had as a parent. Maybe some of you grew up in a home where mom or dad, or mom and dad were just gone. Maybe physically, like literally just weren't there. Or maybe just emotionally, they were so checked out they may have not been there. And then there's this other parenting that I would call kind of hands-off. If this is just absent, then this is hands-off parenting. This would be honestly how I think my parenting was growing up, in the environment I grew up in. I had a mom and dad always there, provided for us, paid the bills, food on the table, clothes on our back, good people, but they were just kind of hands-off. And in all honesty, from the youngest age I can remember, I just kind of learned how to navigate life on my own. Probably explains half of my issues. But I figured out just, here's how I'm going to get through life, here's what I'm going to do, and I just largely felt like I was on my own to figure life out. Good people, hands-off. Then there's the kind of parenting that I think is a lot like many of us today. It's the bubble wrap parent. It's the parenting that we have convinced ourselves is good parenting because we're taking care of our kids. We're protecting them. We're giving them everything they want. We're giving them everything we need. We're keeping them from all harm. We're keeping them from all danger, right? And here's what we're doing. Many times, we're keeping them from the plans God has for them. It's bubble wrap parenting. We're at the core, what we believe is we're a better parent than he is. So here's what I would just love to have you do. Now's where you're going to grab your bubble wrap. You got it? Everybody got it? If you have a desire to say, no, listen, I do believe God is a better parent, and I don't want to just believe that. I want to demonstrate that in how I raise my kids. Would you grab the bubble wrap, and as a sign of that, on 3, 2, 1, we're just going to pop it and sing no more bubble wrapping parent. You ready? 3, 2, 1. That's good. Well done. Well done, 11 o'clock. Here's the last kind of parenting I want to quickly give you. Courageous faith parenting. Well, some of you are late poppers there. Courageous faith parenting. What is courageous faith parenting? Can I just give you a couple really practical things to try and write down? If you want to be a courageous faith parent that does this, it says, I'm going to parent, I'm going to take care of, I'm going to be responsible. God has entrusted them to me. At the same time, he is theirs more than mine. He cares about them more than I do, has plans I don't have, which means there's times I have to place them in the basket, in the reeds even, and step back and trust him to them, and them to him. Like if that's the kind of parent and courageous faith you want to have, a couple things I would encourage you to work towards doing. Number one is have a vision for their life. Like have a vision for your kid's life. Like, do you have actually something written down, specific plans, like by name? I have Jocelyn, Tobin, and Corinne. And my wife and I have talked about this a number of times over, where there are very specific things that we picture each one of our kids becoming and doing, much of which we haven't even told them yet. Things that lead how we pray for them, even things that lead how we parent them. We also have, I feel like years ago, God gave me a picture in my head of how all three of them are going to struggle. So a vision for your kids isn't just what they're going to do and who they're going to become. It's also how they're going to struggle. Because your kids are going to struggle differently through life. Different because of their personality, different because of the plans God has for them. They're just going to struggle different. Do you have any sense of what either of those are? And if you don't, that doesn't make you a bad parent. It just means that for most of us, here's what we do. We get caught up in the tyranny of parenting, right? And life just doesn't afford us the opportunity often to just step back and go, I'm going to pause for a moment, and I'm going to actually put some intentional thought into beyond tomorrow, beyond dinner this evening. If you haven't done that, I would encourage you, take some time, sit down, and just start pinning out some thoughts. What do I see based on their personality and what my heart may say, how God might even speak to you? What do I see as possibility for the future of what God has for them? Both in who they'll become and how they'll uniquely struggle through life, their walk with God and all he's trying to do for them. Which leads me to number 2. If you're going to try and develop a vision for their lives, you had better be talking to their first father every day. You think God doesn't know what the plans are for their life? He does, because he has them. They're his. He made them. So how often are you just talking to their first father about them? I hope often. I hope daily. I want to do it daily. I don't do it daily. I should. I want to be a parent that every day talks to their first father first. And every day spends time in front of him listening to his counsel and his wisdom and laying my kids out before them. Third thing I would challenge you to do is write this one down. It's your number one goal as a parent is to lead them to Jesus. I think your number one goal is to lead them to Jesus. You know, parenting comes from the Latin word to bring forth. If we're as parents supposed to bring forth our kids, you got to ask, what am I bringing them forth to? I think to Jesus, which is why once he got on his disciples when they said, no, he doesn't have time for kids. And Jesus is like, what? No. He totally has time for kids. You bring them here. You don't stand in the way. Another time he even said, for such as these is the kingdom of heaven. Not you mature adults. He says it's these kids. Heaven itself is made up of them. Get them in my presence. I think our number one job is to bring our kids to the presence of Jesus. So week 4, last week of the series, that's what we're going to talk about. How do we practically parent in a way that leads our kids to Jesus? And then lastly, I'd say this. Courageous faith parenting is knowing when to do this. Knowing when to have those moments that as a parent, you have to trust them in a relationship, in a decision, in a moment, in an illness, where you have to trust them to the good, sovereign, fatherly care of God. And step yourself back, believing he's a better parent than you could ever be. So one of the things we're going to do this morning is we're going to end with communion. And I'm going to challenge you to do this as we go to communion in a minute. I'm going to challenge you to grab a 3x5 card in the front of your chair. So in the back of every chair, there's a card. And I'd love to have you grab one of those and take a few minutes and think through your kids. Maybe it's not even your kid. Maybe it's a niece. Maybe it's a nephew. Maybe it's just a kid that's in your life that God has allowed you to have a role in their life. And I just wonder, what would this moment look like that you're facing with each of them? For me, this looks different for Jocelyn than it does for Corinne, than it does for Tobin right now. But there are these moments for all of my kids, and there will continue to be. I wonder if you can write down what that is, and then before or after you go to communion this morning, come up here and drop it in the basket. That doesn't mean you're going to walk out of here and do it perfect and make no mistakes. It doesn't mean you're going to walk out of here and perfectly go, trusting unto God. But it does mean that you're at least beginning with a willingness to say He is their Father first. He loves them more than I do. He has plans I don't have, and I will trust my kids by faith to the hands and plans of God. Can you do that by at least starting to drop that in here and acknowledge that's the parent you want to be and the way that you want to parent them? Maybe some of you would go, man, I lost my chance. My kids are grown and out of the house, and there's no change in the past. I can't go back and undo it, so I don't have an opportunity for this. And I would just say, yes, you do. Because as long as you draw air into your lungs, your mom, your dad, and you know, the most powerful moment of my 42 years of life that I've had yet with my dad was when he sat me down of his own initiative years ago. And he brought back a memory that I had from my childhood, which was one of my worst moments with him, that if you would have asked me prior to that, I would have never thought he even remembered, let alone would ever apologize for. And of his own initiative, sat me down years ago, looked me in the face, and apologized for it, telling the story exactly the way I remembered it. Because you know how sometimes, even when somebody apologizes for something, they have a better version of it than what really happened? He told me exactly how it happened, exactly how I remembered it, and then begged for my forgiveness and apologized with tears. Now, I'm not suggesting you have to do it exactly that way, but here's what I am suggesting. If you're a human being and a parent, you've made mistakes. Welcome to the club. One of the best moments you'll ever have with your kids is to be an honest person with humility that looks them in the face and says, I screwed up and I'm sorry, with no expectation for how they'll respond. That was what I loved about my dad. He didn't sit there and go, now, do you have anything you want to apologize for? Are you going to forgive me? He just let it go with no expectation. That brought so much healing into a relationship that for he and I for many years had been very broken. Maybe for you as a parent, that's the step you need to take walking out of here. Or maybe for some of you today isn't even about you as a parent. Maybe it's about the reality that you feel like Moses. Maybe you're like, man, this defines my whole upbringing. Put in the reeds. And it wasn't by courageous faith. My mom and dad just tossed me to the gators. And maybe your life feels like it's still in this place a little bit. Maybe what you just need to know today before you walk out of here is that you always were and you still are with God. He always was and He still is with you. And His whole desire is to pluck you up out of those reeds, set you in a new family, and begin to lead you towards the plans He has always had for you. I'll give you one more verse. This is from the Psalms. This is what the Psalms tell us about the nature of God. Sing to God, sing in praise of His name. Extol Him who rides on the clouds, and rejoice before Him, a father to the fatherless. You feel like you were fatherless? Maybe your mom, maybe your dad was there, but they were checked out. Maybe they weren't there at all. Maybe they were there and not checked out, but there was just some brokenness that exists there. Listen to me. God is a father to the fatherless, broken, painful places in your heart. A defender of the widows is God in His holy dwelling. Listen to this. Who sets the lonely in families. There's a reason that this is not just called church, community, group, gathering, that the scriptures refer to us as a family. God says, you didn't have brothers and sisters, now you do. You didn't have a parent, I am your father. And if you feel like this is you, and you're still here, going, I'm wishing I would get picked up out of the reeds, know this. It's His desire and His goodwill to want to do that for you, to pick you up from that place, set you in a new family, and lead you towards the plans that He has. He always was, and He is with you, even if you don't yet see what He has been up to. So this morning, I think it's perfect that we end with communion. Because in a way, communion is all about the picture of God the Father sending His Son to the chaos of this world, the reeds of this world, for the salvation of all humanity. When Jesus was with his disciples for their very last meal, the scriptures tell us that he just took what was on the table, the food that was on the table. So he took some of the wine, he took some of the bread, he broke the bread, he gave it to his disciples, poured the wine. What they didn't get at the time is he was trying to paint a picture for them of what was about to happen on the cross. Days later, they got it. They got it when they saw his body ripped to pieces, when they saw the blood pouring out of him. So one of the things that Jesus said then is, do this when you gather. Do this in remembrance of me. So maybe part of what we do this morning as we go to communion is we just need to realize that the moments that maybe we as a parent feel like we've broken, we've screwed up, you know what? The cross is about wiping that away too. Maybe it's the moments of broken parenting that happens to us. The cross can heal that too. Maybe as we go to the communion this morning to celebrate what God has done for us, we take an awareness to that table that it extends into our parenting, into our relationships with mom and dad, with us as mom and dad, to our kids as well. Maybe there's things even this morning at the communion table we leave there that has been plaguing us here. And then whether you go after there to here or you start here and then go to the table, I would just challenge you this morning to make both of those a part of your moment with God as we come to a close. And here's what I'd also say too. Some of you are still here just checking church out and faith in general. Not even sure yet what to do with the God thing. You realize we made this place for you. To be a place where you can question and doubt and even disagree. So if you're going, I don't want to get up and do any of that. I certainly don't want to go to communion. There's no pressure and there's no shame in sitting where you are. But if you're in a place in your journey where you want to go back and you want to celebrate what God did for you, and you're willing to say, I also want to parent the way you want me to parent, then make these two places your moment. The communion place is at the back of the room where we set up tables. There's juice in the cup, and there's bread. So we're going to have the band come out. They're going to do one last song, and it's kind of as you're ready. This is your moment and your time. You either go to the table first or here first, but you use this for the last couple minutes to do what you need to do. Father in heaven, I pray that you be present to us, speak to us, draw us into you in the last couple of minutes of this morning. That even as we go through very physical action and activity, that you would create very internal moment with you and I, and with you and us. In Jesus' name, amen.
We're going to take the next moment and we're going to sing a song with you guys. You can get up and you can go take the communion as you will.
Dr. Henry Cloud says that most of the issues that we end up developing as adults is related to some lack of a boundary when we were kids or an inappropriate boundary when we were kids. Next week, we're going to keep on in the series, and we're going to talk about boundaries in a way that as parents, maybe we can start to learn some healthy boundaries for our kids, but also as adults, that we can realize that maybe some of the things we have long wrestled with goes all the way back to a boundary that was never in place or an inappropriate boundary in place that God can begin to bring not just wisdom and clarity, but also healing too. Also, the sun's not outside yet, but the rain has stopped, which means that our picnic is on. I just looked out the window. They've got everything set up outside and are ready to go. So hopefully you're planning to stay back, if not just for a little bit, meet some people, have fun. Should be a good time out there, and we'll even feed you while we're at it. Last thing I want you to know before you walk out of here, today is the last day officially of our White Flag Pledge campaign. That has been the 3-year campaign that we've been running for this facility. We have been in here a little over a year now. We ran a 3-year campaign to raise money for this. Today, that campaign ends. Now, we have given you 2 numbers over the last couple of months as we've drawn into the close. 400,000, 450,000. 400,000 was the must-hit goal. 450,000 was the it would be incredible to hit goal, and so much we could do still in the future with that. I am happy to tell you that as of this moment, we are only about $4,000 away from hitting the $400,000 mark. So we have until midnight tonight when that officially closes down and we stop the campaign. So I would just ask you, if you've been considering giving to that, if you haven't even heard of it, but you're like, I would like to give to that, if you've been waiting till the last minute, this is the last minute, or if you're like, you know what, I want to help push this over the end still. You can either do that in a physical sense today before you leave. Out there, the big track that we have has got a slot in the center for those donations, or you can even go online, paradoxchurch.com/give. There's a drop-down menu, walks you through what to do. But I'm excited because we're planning already what to do with what God has prepared for us. We're planning about how we're going to celebrate that and come back and tell you about how we not only are confident we're going to hit that mark, but we're going to exceed it by the end of today. So hopefully, if you haven't been a part of that, you'll consider being a part of that as we draw it into a close. If you have anything this morning that we can listen to, you want to talk, if we can pray with you, if we can pray for you, if you just need us to listen while you talk, if you need us to say anything back, we've got a team of people up front. That's the whole reason they're here. They're here just to love on you and to care for you and to maybe help you process through anything you need to do this morning. Other than that, Paradox Church, you are greatly loved. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and hopefully we'll see you outside for a little bit. Bye-bye.